Boom! It's part 2 of this whole what's in your supplements. How to figure out in this hundreds of brands, from large mega companies like Optimum to the little guy or the person on social media who just wanted a pre-workout.
You made 550 units at some local garage.
Yeah, we're going to tell you exactly what to look for, but we don't know everything. And there are some variables in there that make it a little harder. We're going to try and explain that as much as possible. Of course, I'm here with these two fine gentlemen.
Brent Laffey, president of Armada Nutrition.
And Tim Gran, R&D process engineer at Armada Nutrition.
So these are the guys to talk to when it comes to what goes on in manufacturing. Because as a manufacturer, they have to know their competition. They also have to know what's going on in the world. I know about it. I've been in the industry for over 20 years. So looking at the grand scope of the industry and what goes on, how do you know what to buy? And I think one thing we need to look at is why a co-manufacturer is a good thing, and also how it's not the only way to look at if it's a good thing or not. And to go into the different levels, number one, you have the guy who, like me, uses co-manufacturers. And then you have your vertically integrated companies that handle everything from production to final product and selling it to the store. So those are the two things I think we want to go over.
Yeah, I think it's, and there's good and bad in both, right?
Yes.
So, and we talked about previously, we don't need to spend too much time and then the brands, there's some brands that have a high involvement behind formulations and are into the science, and there's some that are hands off. Why I think a lot of the recipe has gone to where it's a brand working with the co-man is cost. I mean, the cost of running a manufacturing facility is huge. And on top of that, to do it on your own, you have to have huge revenue. So I'm not saying small brands that manufacture some stuff, they can't do it successfully. It's much harder because you're going to have to invest a ton of money for typically probably only going to run your brand, seeing that you aren't going to want to run other people's brands.
Yeah.
Nor would a lot of the brands want to run their stuff knowing that you own a brand. So the scale of it makes it hard. So you have to get to this certain level. Optimum Nutrition is one of them, huge brand, makes probably a lot of sense for them to own their manufacturing.
Yes.
And they were also acquired. They were a brand that got acquired, and they put a lot of money from a bigger billion-dollar dairy company into manufacturing. So it's a different setup, right? So most of the brands, I think, what you're seeing that are succeeding are good brands that are focused on sales and marketing and innovation, that find the right co-man who covers that end, which is from quality to stability to aiding in the formulation, is a good recipe. So it's kind of the overlap of the market, but 9 out of the 10 brands that you touch at a GNC or Vitamin Shop or you look online, they probably are not manufacturing their own product.
Yeah, and that could be a good thing. Now let me go into the worst case scenario. In 2004, I just started Scivation, but I worked at Weeder Publications for years before. Now what happened is I saw in a manufacturing facility that also produced the finished good, literally the guy showed me, I thought he was joking or I would have called him on it. He's like, hey, this is the clenbuterol we spike our product with. He had some code words, but that's basically
You're like thinking he's joking.
I thought he was playing. So anyway, so when I started, it was like 2 months into starting Scivation. I'm at a bodybuilding show at Vets Auditorium in Culver City, California. And his old partner came to me and he was like, hey, do you remember when you were in our office, and his name was Brian Rubach, said, you know, hey, you know what, man, I'm like, yeah, of course I remember that. I'm like, that was funny. He's like, yeah, well, he's kind of probably going to go to jail. And, you know, I'm like, oh, that's terrible. So anyway, long story short, I didn't even think about it. I'm like, well, have a good day, go home. Next thing you know, the next day I get a call from the FDA, his attorney, or the district attorney in San Diego, California. At that time I lived in California, like, we're going to need you to testify. And I'm like, for what? And I'm like, oh, that bastard. So the company was Pharmagenics, and they were spiking their product, which is called Ventolin, with clenbuterol. And people were getting phenomenal results, but I mean, and I think it was too much because people were like, you see, like at that time, it was people were like shaking and stuff. And so nonetheless, I had to testify in front of a grand jury. Now, what I said is that manufacturer had their finished product. So when I get into that, what I'm saying is, if you were, let's say you're Pharmagenics, Brian, and you went, hey, Brent, I want you, Tim, I want you guys to go into your GMP facility that you've spent millions of dollars making, all suited for all these services, and I want you to, in my small brand, I want you to throw some clenbuterol in it. You tell him, you'd probably punch him in his face and then laugh at him,
Yeah.
or whatever order you do that in. Whereas when you own the manufacturing facility, I'm not saying they all do this, we're going to give you good examples later as well. When you own the manufacturing facility, there is nobody to say no. And you know, when money's involved, people tend to forget about morals, ethics, and public safety.
100%.
Whereas what a contract manufacturer, when you use a good one, like Armada, is that you're like, you know that those guys aren't going to do anything that, one, jeopardizes them losing their license, and two, puts the public at risk.
Yeah, I mean, we've lost business in the beginning. It was hard when you're trying to build business, because not even to the level of something like that, but and Tim can attest to this, is we're so ultra conservative on the materials we bring in or allowed to use. Even if it's on a watch list, it's not even been banned, we won't touch it.
Yeah.
So we're MSF for sport, we're also BRC as well, so we're running a foods audit as well. We will not touch anything even in the gray, so there's no doubt. It's less common these days, but 3-4 years ago, we'd get pre-workouts in all the time that we'd have to just tell them, you either got to reformulate or we cannot bring it. It's hard, but it's obviously worked, and I think the market's become a little bit more mainstream, has gone closer to what we're trying to do, and obviously transparent labels have made that happen, but there's no doubt it's lost us business.
Oh, absolutely. So how hard is it to flavor clenbuterol? Just kidding.
Well, once you actually get the sweat out of your eyes, it's actually not that
So did
bad.
Calyx. But I mean, how many people have we told now we can't run DMHA or DMAA or DMBA or all that stuff? But I mean, not just those, but you have to be aware of what you can and can't use, and like you even have to interpret WADA. Some of it's not very explicit.
Well, it's even where it's derived from, right? Even
Right.
at that level, it could be something that's coming from a plant that obviously has been perceived. So we're doing everything to stay in the clear, and I think the brands appreciate that they're here. One level we've done, even taken further, is our lab we had an Armada lab. It was run through Armada. We actually went and got it certified ISO 17025, I think 2 years ago. Mm-hmm. So it's actually a third-party lab that is not part of this LLC and reports differently, not into me. So I have no control over that lab. So it's actually vetted as a third party. So if companies want to not only just get a result from Armada, they can get a result from the third-party lab as well too. So we're trying to do everything we can to show people transparency, but also give them options than just here's the Co-Man C of A.
I would say kind of add on to that too. We're also, you have to be kind of hyper aware of the regulations, but that actually adds a lot of value to brands because you can kind of advise on some things that might not even be intuitive. Like there might be sucrose limits in Latin America that you didn't know about, or
right.
Can you use yohimbine in Australia, or
this is where brands that we know are going to grow and scale,
right?
And that's typically the ones we want to go with. We want to believe that they're going to grow. So when they put out a pre-workout, great, you're using agmatine sulfate. I don't have necessarily an issue with that ingredient, but just so you know, it's banned in the UK.
Bingo.
So things like that, some people aren't looking at, so they don't even know. They ship product to the UK, all of a sudden they have something that's perceived as safe here, not in the UK. So I mean, there's different levels of safety issues or quality issues, but we're trying to do our best to mitigate all the risks for the brand before they launch a product.
Yeah, we had and I forgot what the ingredient is, but I actually got it didn't go to class action because but like 2 years prior, we had an ingredient that was now on the watch list. Now, what you guys got to realize, the FDA doesn't really need to ban anything. As soon as they put something on the watch list, you're getting class action sued. Doesn't matter if you knew it or not, it's coming at you. So by having a co-man who might have heard through their sources that this is getting looked at by the FDA is a huge asset to have as a company. And I actually had an ingredient I was going to use, I think it was about 8-9 months ago. I'm not going to say what product, but at the time my co-man was like, bro, I don't know if it's coming down, but I heard this is going to be on the watch list. Sure as heck, in the next 4 months, it was on there. And I wasn't privy to that. And the ingredient you would never guess, like friggin' agmatine is banned in the UK.
Right.
Vitamin K was just legalized in Canada. Carnitine was illegal in Canada. And with a contract manufacturer dealing with, you got to realize, like when we ship things to the UK, to Australia, to Portugal, to wherever, we're not doing the paperwork. We give it to them.
Yeah.
That's another thing they do is they handle the crap you don't want to handle.
Yeah, you want to outsource. I mean, if you're a brand and starting up, you want to outsource as much as you possibly can
Yes.
to professionals that, one, also take a lot of liability off of you, right? So that's finding the right one who can do that, and trusting them is obviously key. But like to Marc said, there's also a lot of good brands
Yes.
that we know manufacture. Like we can give a shout out to one we know. I've been there and actually visited it, and he talks the talk but walks the walk, and that's NutriBio.
NutriBio does a great job of vertical integration, and I think he's been doing it a long time, so it's not a startup.
Yeah.
And that also, and Optimum, I'd say I would trust what's on the label of Optimum.
Sure, I always
their flavor systems aren't good to me, but
they're a little bit dated, but actually to the point, they're doing the right things.
Yeah.
They have a very nice plant, and then Marc has grown it over time. I don't know if he started today, if he could do what he has done, but it's a testament to him. 15 years ago, he was trying to do transparent labels, handle his own manufacturing because he didn't trust people, but he knew he could do a better job, and it's paid off for him. But that's one brand out of so many.
How many? And so you get into all that, you get into the good, the bad, but again, like what I want to emphasize is there are good apples. Now, what I would be concerned about if a company comes out brand new and they say, hey, we do our own stuff. Or let's say, and I just did a video on this, you have research chemicals. In my opinion, you just can't trust that.
Yeah.
And if you do have a brand who comes out brand new, hey, we manufacture our own stuff. I knew a company, I'm not going to say names, who had a really nice little niche business selling protein. They literally were making it in a used yet hopefully cleaned cement mixer, because there's not really that big of a difference.
I've seen some wild things.
There's because that's basically what the tumbler blender, and you have the ribbon blender, and then you have the one that actually just uses the static electricity, where it kind of So there's different kinds of blenders, but think about it, a cement mixer just tumbles. It just does this, so there's not that big of a difference. So they repurposed it, and they were literally making it in their warehouse, bottling it by hand. And this is a brand that if you were to look online, if I give you the name and you Google it, they're the good bros. Like, everybody trusts this brand. They're the trusted guys. They're the good guys. No, they're not. They're not at all. So that's a problem. That's a huge problem. And the reason they did that is, and I'm going to get into this, this is a great time to bring this up. I think this is something that part of the business you guys don't understand, is that the only reason I have been able to do what I've been able to do with my businesses is the fact that I have a D2C business, a direct-to-consumer business. And I make really lousy margins selling to businesses. So when I do a big deal with the Vitamin Shop, when I do a big deal with whoever, I'm not really making that much money. I have to sell so much to kind of get my money back, right? To break even, right?
My break even. You're adding volume to help you in your D2C business, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
exactly. But the fact that we do have Tiger Fitness on one end, that allows us to have that direct-to-consumer margin. We're able to fund the growth. Now, when you put it together, the blended margin is nice. Yeah. When you put that B2B alone, I cannot tell you how, I do not know personally how a company worth less than $10 million in this industry, based on the margins they're receiving from retailers right now, how they're even staying in business unless they have a big venture capitalist or a big loans, or they're just losing money. But these guys are always posting with Lambos and this and that, so I have no clue what's going on. But when I see that, it kind of scares me. Yeah. So if you're but obviously if you're like Optimum, right? Like, they probably could buy a Lambo and a few mansions and a Bentley and a Bugatti. But like, you look at these companies, they're like small, just started, and then they don't have any direct business, but yet they're balling. That makes me question if they're putting the money back into their research and development. You know,
100%.
And you have a similar situation here.
Yeah, I mean, if we have an integration on ingredients and flavors with a sister company, so we have obviously really improved COGS on a lot of our aminos and a lot of our other powders and also flavors. That keeps us to where we can afloat what we do from a quality standpoint. If we didn't have that advantage, I mean, the margins are so thin in this if we were going to do it the right way, which we are, which includes, full cleans in between your runs, actually having to shut down for X amount of hours to do a true full clean, doing swabs to make sure there's nothing residual on it, testing, obviously in the beginning, testing at the end. We can't do 500 unit lots in some cases and do the right amount of testing without raising the price level. So a lot of times, to be honest, a lot of the stuff we've had to walk away from is, shockingly enough, some of the really small brands would have price points that were tougher than some of the big brands. Doesn't make sense in theory, but they're finding someone who's very small to do it. Whether they're cutting corners, I'm not necessarily saying, but they're finding ways to be very, very inexpensive, which makes you kind of wonder, right?
Yeah, it's things that I look at and I'm like, how are they still in business? And look, it's easy to get an investor, what I found. I've known guys who literally have an Instagram page with 10,000 people who found some jabroni to put $2 million into them. I don't know how they do it. I don't have them kind of sales skills, but I've never had a venture capitalist. I've never had a loan. You know, I've had a line of credit, but honestly, I don't get it. And I'm not saying everyone who has that is doing it wrong, but I would kind of question that. You know, I would question that 100%. But and on another note, what a lot of big brands do is they'll go to some co-mans and they'll give you a formula. I need this to be at this price, and it's not possible. So sometimes,
you look at the powder. Like it happens less, which is great. And I think it's a good sign of the industry. But like 5 years ago, I'd get formulas. We come over, input the powder costs, and be like, without adding in packaging, overhead, this thing called margin or testing, literally we can't even do the powder pricing. So how are you getting that right? And that kind of goes back to one of the biggest issues we saw in the industry. It would put a black eye to a lot of people, was the protein spiking.
Oh goodness.
Everybody blames the brands, and no doubt the brands, some of them had a lot to play in it. But there's always two sides to that. Some of the brands, and it's shame on them for not getting third-party testing, shame on them for not looking into it, are finding the wrong co-man. Some of it they didn't even know. So they were getting C of A's or probably specs that were hitting what they thought, right? But in the return, it could have been the co-man was actually the one doing the spiking to make margins. So we've seen it both ways. So there's bad characters on both sides, but we don't. The nice part is, I can't say protein spiking is completely gone, but it is not like it used to be.
It's it's bigger in other countries.
Yeah,
way large. I know domestic companies here who make stuff amino spiked specifically for overseas sales, but not here, because they know that idiots like me won't test it.
Right.
And I gotta admit, like I can't. I do kind of blame the brands, but the brands who went to a co-man with a price, I don't think, see, what we used to do is and this is why when I did my first amino spiking video, and God bless amino spiking, because that's what kind of launched my brand. But, you know, when we first started doing the Tiger Tested program, we had one test for protein, nitrogen. Because back in the day, people used to only spike with maltodextrin and dextrose. So I didn't even know that was a thing. And then I remember I found out, and I was infuriated because I remember it was from a large brand, a really large brand, and they used to send me protein because I was friends with them when I worked at Weider.
Yeah.
And I remember I had literally, what did Rock used to say, like 10 pounds of monkey crap in a 5-pound bag? And it was literally, so whey protein is fluffy. A 5-pound container usually has about maybe 10 to 20% open, right? It was literally filled this much. And one thing you gotta know is product density, right?
Yeah.
Like taurine is much more dense than protein.
Taurine and glycine.
So yeah, so you're using a very dense material which doesn't fluff. So I should have known, but I had no idea. So then I found out amino spike. Amino spiking tests have gone down. It's now probably, it's like $200.
Yeah.
Back then it was $800 a test. So a consumer is never going to go out and test that.
Yeah.
So it took me testing it, and that's when, you know, it got class action sued. And
but it's, I mean, that is to like a person that's a fan of the industry, loves supplements, but also a business owner. I guess I take it a little personal. That is the worst thing you can literally do. I mean, it's actually fraud. The fact that even these people didn't get even nearly the punishment they should have, and it gave a black eye to this industry.
It was diabetic, you know, you just gave him a bunch of maltodextrin. Like, dangerous on that end too.
I became really good friends with the class action attorney because actually, and I have no problem saying I was the guy who was working with the class action attorney on this. Call me a rat snitch. I hate those companies that did that. You know, I can't see me hating them less if it was a co-man, they had no idea.
Yeah, but it's like some of them to the degree of like, some, okay, if it's a rounding error and you're like, can be forgiven, whatever. There's one I remember specifically, and it was a mass gainer. I think they were claiming for 50 grams of protein. Right? It was something horrific. It was like 13% protein, 14% protein. Like, what the
Yeah, it was insane. And the thing is, so the attorney who actually initiated these class action suits, and by the way, they're still involved in some of them.
Yeah.
It's public information, but I just don't want to bring that up here. So the reason he got involved in this, that wasn't even his law focus.
Yeah.
He's one of us. He trains.
Right.
He's a meathead, and he saw this, and he was irate, and we've been friends ever since. One of my best friends, because he was so upset at this that he was basically being a vigilante. He was going out there. He's like, I'm going to take these bastards down. And I'm like, you know what? Anything you need. Because I was mad because I feel I can't get those gains back.
Yeah.
You know, even though I was getting the product for free, like, it's not about the money for me, right? Even at the time before all this, these companies.
You feel like you've been like vandalized.
I wasn't hitting my protein for the day, man. I was less than a gram.
It's crazy.
I would have been Brandon Curry right now if it wasn't for that.
it's like crazy is you look back and you see it as the company I worked for previously was a distributor, and you think about it, we were selling thousands of tons of taurine and glycine to nutrition manufacturers. That doesn't make sense. That business is gone now, just so it's clear. It's not a good sign. It's gone, but like it was so obvious.
I remember I walked through a Co-Man and I saw a pallet of the brand that I was taking, and the protein was like this much of it, because you stack it on the pallets ready for the blender.
Yeah.
They drive it in. Obviously but they don't know. Basically, when you get ready for a blend, you get everything set up, the ingredients for the blender.
Yep.
And it's on usually a pallet. There's different ways, but they load it in, bring it in, clean it down, put it in the blender. They basically just pour the shit in, right? But it's measured out. And it was like a box of whey protein and then stacks and stacks and stacks of taurine drums. So that's
At the end of that's yeah.
So again, to kind of recap, we going over, like, co-mans are great. It's a good thing to look for, and vertical integration is great, but there's not a lot of companies that do it correctly. And if they do it correctly, that should be where, when you have a co-manufacturer, I think you do need a degree of mystery. You shouldn't, co-manufacturers are meant to be in the background. So that's how you can't really know, right? But that's why you go for brands you trust. If it is a brand that either has exorbitantly low prices or whatever, ask to see their facility. Ask to see their not even NSF. We all know I'm not going to dog NSF because you do business with NSF, but NSF is basically like them coming in, checking them and saying, okay, you're ready for the FDA. So if someone is an FDA compliant facility, that's a huge step. I'm not going to say everybody needs NSF. Everybody needs it. I'm going to say that you should ask to see that facility.
Yeah, and I think over time, it's something I've talked to Marc Glazer even about. I think eventually it will get to where if you have to export a product, you actually have to put a manufacturing number on there that is tied to the facility. So for exports, you could actually track back to where the manufacturer is. I think eventually you'll have that visibility long term to all the products. I don't think it's going to happen this year, but eventually that will be the case, and I think that'll be a great thing for the industry because the consumer can do some due diligence on where the product's made at, and there should be some liability with the manufacturer and the brand, right? So I think things will change. One thing I do want to bring up is, like, we're going to switch topics, but if you guys would like to get a better insight of, like, behind the scenes from how we inbound and actually test to release to seeing some of the process to the finished good testing, let us know. We can definitely do a tour if it's of interest. If not, we won't waste our time.
No, I think everybody wants to see that. I think that'd be really cool.
So I think the next one we can do that.
I think that'd be really cool. But anyway, guys, thanks so much. So I think what's next, that kind of completes, like, the different kinds of manufacturing, how things get made, what to look for. And again, we're putting it we're giving you some tips, but there's no foolproof way to know that you're getting, but you got to trust who you're buying. Like, my thing is, people come to me and go, hey man, there's this protein, can I trust it? I'm like, if you have to ask me if you can trust it, you probably shouldn't trust it, right? Like, and also, by the way, I have a brand, you can just buy mine if you ask me. Like, if I'm the measure of trust, like, right, you can buy my stuff. But people ask me that all the time. So if you get a funny feeling, that's something to look into. Like, that's an alarm.
Yep.
Sometimes. But I think the next thing we go into is, let's build a formula.
Yeah. So we will we'll basically get into this as Marc and I are going to act as the customer, the brand, and we're going to see basically what a co-man will do to kind of help put you in the right direction from a compliant product to something that might be stable. So we are actually going to make our today's pre-workout here in a second.
Should be good. All right, we'll see you next time, guys. That's not a game.